so first up is Simon Bell, who probably doesn't need any formal introduction for most of us. But I've got some really interesting background. I've learned a little bit of Simon in this process, so I'm going to read his bio because it speaks to all the energy and enthusiasm that Simon has brought this organization. So since being given a hand-me-down box Brownie camera at the age of 6, photography has been core to Simon's life. And that links the many artistic, commercial, and now educational ways that he's been involved with. After studying at York University, Simon worked as a studio photographer before starting his own audiovisual business in Toronto, creating corporate presentations for 20 years. That's a lot of corporate presentations. He deserves a round of applause just for that. Simon has published a series of nature books featuring his 3D photos of wildlife, published by Penguin and Somerville book houses. The series has been incredibly successful. In fact, he sold over 150,000 copies in 6 different countries. I didn't realize that, Simon. That's really impressive. We all know Simon in Guelph, of course, as the former publisher of Snapped. And if any of you have been in any events in Guelph in the past years, you've seen Simon at events, sharing his skills and enthusiasm. He's been a volunteer instructor with Focus on Nature since 2011 and is now executive director. So please join me in welcoming Simon Bell, who's going to take over a mic, and Simon's going to walk us through, give us some of his experiences and insights on photography and nature. Simon, hand it over to you.
Thank you, Curt. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to use the time I have this evening to share some highlights from my rather long career in photography and perhaps a few tips that I might have picked up on the way as advice for young photographers who may be just starting out at whatever stage they're at. So I started thinking myself as a photographer, around the age of 6. I think my dad got a new camera for Christmas and I inherited his box Brownie. If you don't know what a box Brownie looks like, it's one of these cameras. It could shoot about 12 pictures. You had to wait a couple of weeks to get your pictures back. But when you did, wow, I was hooked. I kind of thought of myself as a photographer ever since then. I'm going to share my screen now to just give you some little bit of background visually on what I'm talking about. So the first thing I did was get a photography album and started putting pictures in it. It's now one of my most treasured, cherished possessions. Pictures of my brothers and sisters when we were young and my dad and mom and stuff like that. I probably kept it going for about 10 years and then I moved on to other things. But when I look back now and I see myself as that young guy with 2 little brothers, I wonder, wow, you can start photography when you're pretty young, which is now something that we know in Focus on Nature. Age doesn't really matter about taking good pictures. For me, taking pictures of my family and trips that we went on was always the big thrill for me. We did a lot of traveling as a family, but the picture that I probably am most proud of when I was 9 years old was a picture of our Queen and her husband, Prince Philip, as they were driving past to open the St. Lawrence Seaway. Now, I don't know if a 9-year-old paparazzi could get a shot like this today, but if you get yourself in the right place at the right time and you've got the right equipment, magic can happen. So I would say to all young photographers, don't underestimate the power of your camera to get a great picture. Let's move on to about 10 years later. I went to India with my friend Paul, who was at university with me. We hatched this idea that we could backpack to India. And it was an amazing trip for me to spend this time in the East. The sights and the sounds, the tastes and smells were all so different. And I kind of told myself, don't just hang back and take candid pictures from a distance, get involved with the people. So this was my rickshaw driver one day, and I asked him if I could take a picture. He was more than happy. In fact, I started going around taking pictures of all kinds of people. I couldn't speak their language, but these pictures now are something that really takes me back to that time. And I managed to just buy a scrap album and stick them in. And they bring back fond memories to me now. Paul and I traveled on to Singapore where we got jobs. We earned enough money working on a boat to get back to university for our second year. So it was kind of like a gap year for us before I think gap years were an idea. On the way back, I got this picture in the market in Kabul, Afghanistan, and I submitted it to a competition and won an honorable mention, which I'm kind of proud of. That was good enough for me starting out, and I still have it hanging on my wall today, something that brings back those kind of memories. So make sure you don't isolate yourself from your environment, but get involved in any way you can to try and get great shots. A few years later, I bought an old telephone truck, put some tie-dyed curtains around it, got a mattress to go over the back wheel well, and a cooler, and off I went to explore Canada. I ended up in the Yukon, where I met 4 guys who had built a raft. They were following the Klondike Gold Rush people, and they were rafting down the Yukon. They gave me their camera and asked if I could take some pictures as they rounded a particularly difficult bend in the river. I was happy to do that and gave them back their camera. Sort of forgot about the whole thing. But a couple of years later, I was sitting in my dentist's office waiting for an appointment. I picked up a National Geographic, opened it up, and there's my buddies. They sold their story to National Geographic, and I was amazed. And I was even more amazed when I flipped the page and there was my credit down in the bottom of the page of a double-page spread in National Geographic. I kind of thought, whoa, I'm going to be a National Geographic photographer. You know, that was my goal. And I kept traveling and taking pictures. Nothing much came of that until I finally settled down in Toronto a few years later to learn some more photography. And I got a job with an audiovisual company, as Curt mentioned. It was called the AV House. And at this time, it was just a time when things were changing and you could do special effects, optical effects. So you can see I've got a dial there for blue, for yellow, and for magenta. And you can dial any color underneath the camera and capture it with a series of masks. And under my elbow there is an early version of a computer that would actually control the motion control of your stage, that you would have your effects, and you get something like this. So you could put a star filter on, you get a little starburst. You could create multiple exposures as you moved your logo or whatever around and create special effects. We'd break them up into multiple different pictures and put them into different projectors and create sort of limited animation shows. It was a challenging time, and the corporations were very demanding. But I learned a set of skills that I still carry today. This was one of the different kind of things I worked on. It was a poster for Chum, and I went down to Young and Bloor just to get a picture of it so I would remember that I worked on something like this. Eventually I started my own business, Bell Production Services, and I hired a great team of other photographers and just producers and people, and we started producing special effects slides for companies, and we'd win either gold or silver awards for many years, maybe like 7 years in a row. So that was a great time for us. One picture we submitted to our association was had won the best picture in the international competition. And it was just this picture of where we created an outline of the seagull and we used our motion control to fly it into a slide. All of this is done optically. There's no digital effects here. So things that we did back then and in many stages, you could do just basically quite quickly now. I had some great clients like the Toronto Stock Exchange. They hired us to make all their speaker support slides. I worked for Apple doing their slides and so many different companies. The Toronto Stock Exchange actually hired us also to make the first multimedia module that sat in the foyer as you came into the stock exchange so that students could learn how the stock exchange worked. Jim Carrey was just starting out as a comedian in Toronto back then, and a friend of a friend was his agent and got me to make a series of pictures of Jim Carrey posing as different people for his comedy show. I didn't actually get to meet him, too bad, but I didn't actually know he would go on to go to Hollywood and become really super famous. Someone who was famous was Carl Sagan, and his art director, John Lomberg, came into my shop one day and asked if we could give a quote for pictures for a book about comets. And I didn't know it was for Carl Sagan at the time, but it proved to be a very rewarding collaboration. Got to go to the book launch of Comet. That's John on the left and Carl in the middle, and yours truly on the right there. Pretty snazzy tie, huh? And that collaboration led to other work. So Carl was shopping around a script for a book he had written called Contact. And I was asked to make some storyboard images that could help sell the script. This was my image of a dodecahedron flying through a wormhole on the way to its other part of the galaxy. Eventually, that movie starred Jodie Foster, I think, and Matthew McConaughey. We also got to work with the Hubble Space Telescope, these are the first set of images that they had that they wanted to publicize. And my friend John had created this painting in the background of a galaxy, and the Space Telescope Institute sent us a bunch of pictures, and we arranged them like this. Another project was for the Japanese National Telescope on the top of Mauna Kea in Hawaii. They flew me around in a helicopter with the door off so we could get some amazing pictures, all in 3D of the new Subaru telescope. And then I got to do a tour inside the telescope. There were oxygen stations all around the facility in case you were short of breath, because you're at 14,000 feet here. That's a couple of Mitsubishi engineers who were assembling the telescope. You can't really see the mirror, but it's down in there reflecting what's above. And it's 8 meters wide, so it's one of the largest telescopes in the world. That's looking the other way out, and they opened the barn doors so we could let some light in, and got that shot. And another final project was to create a portrait of humanity to go on a mission to the planet Saturn. It didn't actually happen, but it was a great project to work on. These were all our models that John had found in Hawaii, representing different age groups and different races. And this was the final shot we produced. It was called A Portrait of Humanity, showing humans in different positions and doing different things that people do, nursing babies, talking and hanging out together, walking. And the sailboat in the background was to represent voyage, and the little shell in the corner was to represent evolution. And of course, I took the picture in 3D. Now, if you can cross your eyes, you could get the 3D effect, but don't bother. There are devices to do that. But 3D was, it's one of those things that not a lot of other people were doing professionally, so I felt I had a lot of room to grow in it. And that's something I would recommend to young photographers: find a specialty. It's important to have a broad interest, but if you have a specialty and you can work on that and make yourself the best at that area, then you'll build your brand around it, and I think success will come to you. As Curt mentioned, I did get to work on this series of children's books called the Eye to Eye series of books for a local publisher, and it was also published by Penguin. And it had 24 stereo or 3D cards in it, and on a series of different animals. It was mostly shot in zoos, but it was a great project and got me closer to wildlife than I ever imagined. Finally, the publisher sent me to Africa to do a book on Africa, and had a great time because we had a special educational permit to go off-road and get some really nice close-up pictures of some of the animals. I got to spend a morning with a cheetah family, and just had an amazing time. I'd love to go back and do that again. This picture sold quite a few copies after I had taken it, but the publisher unfortunately went out of business soon after I came back from Africa, and the book never got published. Eventually I came to Guelph, and I started with my brother Nicholas, the Snap Guelph newspaper. A lot of work, very hectic, a monthly cycle where you got to do it all over again every month. But after 5 years and 60 odd issues, I felt like I'd really gotten to know a community, and I'd use my photography kind of to bring people together. And I think that's something we could all think about in our photography, is how do we share what we can do? How do we use it in a way that helps people understand where they are, what their environment is, and that sort of thing. It also got me to understand what community spirit really is, you know, hanging out with young people, or just getting to know a community from top to bottom and feeling like you're part of that community. And that's when your photography can really be of benefit. Of course, doing Snap then was a natural segue into volunteering with Focus on Nature, which I got a little information about that soon after I sold my shares in the business, and thought, well, you know, that might bring together certain threads in my life, like community, like photography, and like a love of nature. And now I had something new to learn, how to work with children, how to communicate that. I found that very rewarding. Kids are great to work with. You learn from them as much as they learn from you. And after being a volunteer, I was asked to help run the organization as executive director, and I've been doing that for about 7.5 years now. So what am I doing in my photography now, you might think? Well, I've moved on from the third dimension to the fourth dimension. That would be time. And that sort of means you got to shoot videos, and modern digital cameras shoot excellent video. There's no excuse for not trying your hand at it. This is a little video I made of a monarch butterfly emerging from its chrysalis, and I sped it up about 10 times so that you could see it happen in a reasonable period of time. So what the butterfly is doing now is it's pumping liquid through those black veins to stretch out its wings. And then it has to hang there for a couple of hours to let the wings dry, and then it can fly away. Oops. So bird photography is a big interest of mine. I love trying to get great shots of birds. They're challenging because they don't sit still very long, and they're usually hidden in a bush or something like that. But often if you keep working at it and you've got the right equipment, you can get some great shots. This owl, for instance, was not in the wild, but it was on someone's arm. But it allowed me to get close up and see the detail in those little feathers around its eye. It's pretty amazing. This is a snowy egret, and he was sitting on a park bench in Florida. So I just sort of crouched down underneath and pointed my camera up. And I think this is kind of the last view of a fish before it becomes the egret's breakfast. And hummingbirds, if you ever get down to the tropics, make sure you take your cell phone, because if you know how cell phones can take multiple pictures, and if you press down that button and keep shooting, it shoots so fast that you can freeze the hummingbird's wings, which usually is pretty hard to do without expensive equipment.
Simon, it's Curt. These are brilliant for pictures and story. And I'm just conscious, another minute or two, and then we'll have a quick Q&A, and then we'll throw it over to Peter, if that's okay.
Very good. So I'm just finishing off here. Get close up to nature through macro photography. Digital cameras now can get you very close, and the patterns that you see, you know, in butterflies' wings or birds' feathers are something to treasure. The pattern that a little water strider can make on the water, amazing. And crystals in winter. I love checking out windows on a really cold day and see what kind of patterns are made. This went into a book called A Life of Water and had a quote from David Suzuki beside it, which I kind of was very proud of. And you can play around with the contrast afterwards and create some amazing otherworldly kind of pictures. So I'll wrap it up there. I just want to say, use your photography to get yourself out there in the community, to explore nature, to express yourself, and I think you'll be richly rewarded. So thank you. I will stop sharing now and hand it back to you, Curt.
That was just honestly, I don't know where to start. Like, seriously, we're going to take 4.5 hours now just to drill through that. There was some amazing stuff in there. Thank you so much for sharing that. And what an incredible career.
Yeah.
That's honestly fabulous. And so I want to be really respectful of time and get to Peter. Maybe we'll circle back to that. We've got a couple questions from the group, and these are both excellent. Natalie's wondering, how has your career helped you grow Focus on Nature? So how have these past experiences helped you do all the great things you've done at Focus on Nature?
Well, I think that in some ways, Focus on Nature was a great assembly of some of the different threads in my life and brought them together. I think that as you mature in one career, new doors open up and you never know where that will take you, but you have to be willing to let one door close and a new door open. And if you see that pattern in your life and you keep following it, life gets richer and richer. And I think you bring with you the skills and the little things that you may not think of, but they're with you and they come out when you have a new project and you can make them work for you.
Right, brilliant. And you've obviously done that. I mean, look, just this really quick overview of your career, we've seen what an amazing trajectory it's had and all the different, you've obviously seen doors opening and jumped in, especially around the technology piece. I mean, I really want to circle back to the technology at some point, because the changes you've seen in camera photography have just been profound.
Everything you can do on a cell phone now, like you could create a whole movie without ever putting your cell phone down. It's pretty amazing that the things that we would have to do, go buy the film, put it in the camera, shoot the pictures, go get it processed, get it back, put it in a projector, film the projected screen, you can do that all now in one little device in like a fraction of the time and at no cost. Pretty amazing.
It is. We could chat for hours about that. Simon, thanks so much for sharing.